All right, today we are diving into something really fascinating. It's a book called Cottage Economy by a guy named William Cobbett, and it's basically a guide to self-reliance from the 1800s. We're going to dig into his advice on everything from bees to goats and see if these old school life hacks have anything to teach us today. So, Cobbett kicks things off with this proverb, and it really gets to the heart of his entire philosophy. It's not just about keeping an eye on your stuff. It's about the value of personal care, of being genuinely invested in the well-being of the things and especially the creatures that you're responsible for. For Cobbett, this idea of care is pretty much the most important lesson of all. He argues that teaching your kids to look after animals is way more valuable than any little bit of profit you might get from them. It's really about building character right from the very beginning. And here's where he really connects the dots. He links these simple, everyday chores directly to what a person is worth later in life. He seriously believed that a laborer's value was directly tied to how well they could be trusted with animals. It's a pretty powerful idea, right? That this sense of responsibility, this trustworthiness, isn't just a nice quality, it's a practical skill that you start learning as a kid. Okay, so let's get practical. His first example, the one he calls the easiest and most rewarding thing for a working person to do, is keeping bees. He basically sees it as a source of wealth that costs you nothing but your attention and care. And look, he's not just talking in vague terms here. He actually does the math. Cobbett figures that what you get from a single bee stall in a year is worth about 2 bushels of good wheat. Now, for a family in the 19th century, that is a major return on your effort. And you can really see the impact when you think about it. If someone can manage, say, 3 of these stalls, that's 6 bushels of wheat. By his calculation, that's enough bread for about 1/8 of the entire year. It's a straight line from just a little bit of care to actually putting food on the table. And I love how incredibly specific he gets. He doesn't just say, oh, protect your bees. No, he tells you exactly how. This super low-tech, totally organic pest control method for keeping ants away from the hive, it's just a perfect example of his practical, hands-on advice. Now, when it comes to poultry, geese, ducks, you name it, Cobbett had let's just say some very strong opinions. His core belief was simple. An animal's diet directly and dramatically changes how its meat tastes. You are what you eat, and so are your birds. He was so proud of his method for fattening up geese. He'd buy them, pen them up, and feed them a specific diet of oats, water, and fresh lettuces from the garden. And the result? He says the birds were so good his friends called them swans, a world away from the tough, gamey geese that just ate whatever was left over in the fields after the harvest. And if you thought he was intense about geese, just wait till you hear about ducks. He warns that ducks will eat anything, and I mean anything, garbage, filth. His description of a duck's palate is memorable. The solution was the same, though. Pen them up, give them clean oats and greens, and you'll get meat that's delicate, not disgusting. And all this leads him to this really fascinating observation he made about habit and upbringing. He noticed that if you take turkey chicks and have them raised by a regular old chicken, they don't develop those wild, wandering instincts of their turkey mom. Instead, they just copy the hen's behavior and stick close to home their entire lives. Cobbett does not bury the lead here. He takes this little farming observation and turns it right into a parenting lesson. He's basically asking parents, hey, shouldn't you realize that the habits you teach your kids are going to stick with them forever, just like the hen's habits stick with those turkeys? It's such a powerful metaphor. Okay, so let's move on to even smaller creatures and see how this all builds on his core idea of teaching kids through animal care. With pigeons and rabbits, the lesson becomes even more direct. And for him, this is key. The main benefit wasn't even the meat. It was the way these little animals could grab a child's interest and teach them responsibility. He says they keep an interest constantly alive in a little chap's mind, so the emotional development was every bit as important as the practical result. But of course, this is William Cobbett we're talking about, so he was always practical. Right alongside those moral lessons, he does the calculation. A small setup of 3 female rabbits and 1 male could give a family a rabbit to eat every 3 days. That's 121 rabbits a year, a huge source of food from something that also teaches great life lessons. All right, now we get to the animal that Cobbett makes this passionate, almost personal case for, the goat. He really saw it as the most underrated, most useful creature a working family could possibly own. So he frames his whole argument as a direct comparison, drawing on his own experience from his time in the army in Canada. When you put a goat up against a sheep, well, the goat wins on every single point. As you can see, it's tougher, it's way less picky about food, it's braver, and it gives milk for a lot longer. He talks about his own goat giving over 3 half pints of milk a day, even in the harshest weather. But what really sets them apart is their unbelievable stomach. And this is not an exaggeration. He literally says they will make a hearty meal out of paper and still give you milk. They thrive on scraps that other animals would turn their noses up at, which makes them the absolute perfect, low-cost provider for a family. So to wrap things up, Cobbett doesn't end with another animal. He ends with this really powerful metaphor for the entire philosophy of self-sufficiency that he was so afraid people were losing. He looks back to a time before you could just go to the store and buy candles. He remembers when light itself was something you made in your own home, for free, by dipping a common weed from a meadow into leftover grease from your cooking pot. And this comparison just gets to the very heart of the change he was so worried about. The rushlight stands for pure independence. You're using what you have. The taxed candle, on the other hand, represents depending on a market, a shop, and a government that taxes even the most basic things you need. For him, losing the rushlight was a symbol of an entire way of life just slipping away. So after 200 years, Cobbett's Guide really leaves us with a pretty thought-provoking question, doesn't it? In our world where you can buy literally anything with a single click, he makes us stop and ask, what skills, what values, and maybe what sense of our own independence have we lost along the way?